Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today, we're going to take a look at the closing argument in the Murdaugh murder case by Creighton Waters, and I'll tell you what I think. Let's head on down to the beach and discuss this. So yesterday, over the period of about 4 hours, Creighton Waters produced a pretty decent closing argument for his case. And other than being about 2 hours too long,
I know this has been a long trial because it's a complicated case. And I'm not going to talk forever. I promise.
I thought it was pretty good. And in some ways, and in some places, it was quite brilliant. The closing was meticulous. And in a case where you have so much to prove, being meticulous is very important. It was comprehensive and meticulous.
Gathering storm in Alex's life. We talked about the family legacy. You heard how important that was to him and how important that was to this family and how it was in danger because of the boat case. The criminal charges as well as the civil charges. That legacy was in danger. And it was threatening also to expose him for who he really was, which would totally destroy his part of that legacy. Talked about his law practice. You've heard how lucrative it is. I had to struggle with him to get him to admit that he was wealthy, making more than $1 million a year. I'll let y'all decide whether or not that's wealthy, but he admitted ultimately that that was not uncommon for him to make that much money on top of stealing and borrowing on top of that. The important thing, though, to remember again, and I want to highlight this, is that they get, under the way that firm worked, they get their money at the end of the year. And then it's up to them to make it last. And that's the big problem that he had. All right, we talked about this. He's got, you heard, I think, Jeannie describe him as having intentional chaos. We had the land deals. He's servicing this huge debt load. He constantly needs new money coming in. And this has been going on for more than a decade, a constant hamster wheel.
If I had been doing this closing, I would have spent an hour going through the case the way Creighton Waters did. I would just have been more crisp. Now, Creighton used a lot of dramatic pauses, and he walked around a lot in the courtroom, which sort of requires the jury to follow along.
There is only one person who had the motive, who had the means, who had the opportunity to commit these crimes, and also whose guilty conduct after these crimes betrays him.
You know, they got to watch where he's going from here to there. And he used visuals very well. I thought he did a fine job with that.
I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is the timeline. And you can see and I'll let y'all look at that, but you can see how this develops, how this hamster wheel continues, how he always has to be one step ahead of the game. We've talked about the Redbeard and the Zero United. Those are the land deals that went bad. They get charged off, but yet Palmetto State Bank, still dealing with him. He then appoints Russell Lafitte a conservator and borrows up to $1 million from the Plyler girls. $338,000 from Deion Martin. Johnny Bush, Manuel Sanders, and Richard, $225,000. He's maxing out $1 million line of credit. Exhibits. This is, as you recall, there'll be his statements, and they're in evidence showing the defendant's assets on June 7th, 2021.
But you have to be wary of rule number 1. Don't annoy the jury. And it can sometimes be used against you by defense counsel who get up and say, look, they spent all this time. They never laid a glove on my guy. And I suspect that when Jim Griffin gets up to do his closing today, that's what he's going to say. Look, they didn't prove their case. The reason they spent so much time going through all this was that, they were trying to weave a basket out of kite string. And there's no substance to this basket. So The length of the closing is really the only criticism that I have. I thought everything else, particularly the way it was meticulous, the way it told a story. You know, one of the best things that he did was he finally tied together his long and drawn out emphasis on all those financial crimes. Because basically what he was laying for the jury was this metaphor of the gathering storm. And I think he also said the hamster wheel at some point. Those are great analogies in this particular instance because he's got all this stuff that's, rolling down on him like a snowball, and he can see the snowball coming, and he's trying as hard as he can to get out of the way. And he can run a little faster and a little faster and a little faster, but that snowball just keeps coming.
It's been going on for so long, always having to stay one step ahead of the game, always having to beg, literally beg, borrow, or steal for over a decade to have the truth from being exposed. That's been going on all that time. The big cases, his partners think he's straightened it out and paid off his debts, but he hadn't. He's getting paid millions of dollars, but he's stealing. On top of that, it's not enough to keep that hamster wheel going.
And I think that's exactly what Creighton Waters did. He made that point. Something had to give. Something had to break. And the only way he could escape liability on the boat case was for the principal actor in that boat case to go away. And I thought he did a marvelous job on the guns and why the guns were missing, on the clothes and why were the clothes missing. In his view, there are just too many things that should be there that aren't there. And of course, the reason that they're not there is Alex Murdaugh is a former prosecutor. He's a lawyer. He knows how to build cases. He knows that facts, not argument, win cases. And this was his way of getting to show to the jury just who Alex Murdaugh was. Another thing that he did very well is he talked about how none of his friends, none of his colleagues, none of his opposing counsel, Curtis Wilson, who worked with him on cases and was a good friend, his family members, he even cheated his family members. He lied consistently and effortlessly to clients, colleagues, friends, family, everyone. And then when he got up on the stand, he claimed to have told the truth. Well, you have to evaluate that. You have to evaluate that in view of his history. And in this case, it probably isn't sufficient to say, well, they proved that he's a liar, but they didn't prove that he's a murderer, because he did use a number of the things that I talked about in my earlier videos to suggest that in effect, he had confessed. He pointed out the body language issue where he's saying no and nodding yes. And I think that may have resonated quite seriously with the jury. The other thing that I think he did, and I think it was just really marvelous, was when he's talking about the actual shooting and he's breaking it down, he gets down and sort of crouches and talks about all these things. And he talks about how Paul is shot.
It was 1,000,001 shot, that it didn't kill him. Alec thought it did. He thinks Paul's shot. And you heard the testimony that Paul appears in the feed room doorway. Is Alex putting down that shotgun to pick up the blackout and is startled by Paul? And that's why the angle's like that? And catches Paul like that? And goes up into the ceiling, as you've heard the testimony from Kinsey.
And then he talks about Maggie running to her baby.
You also heard Paul stippling from that first shot, a close range shot, with no indication that he detected a threat from the person who fired that weapon. And why? Because it was him. Same with Maggie, because Maggie sees what happens and she comes running over there, running to her baby. Probably the last thing on her mind, thinking that it was him who had done this. She's running to her baby while he's picked up the blackout and opens fire at close range, again with no defensive wounds.
The maternal instinct in humans is very, very strong. There are a few people, like Susan Smith, for example, who are not good examples of the maternal instinct. Casey Anthony, perhaps, being another, although she was acquitted. But at any rate, the instinct among mothers to protect their young is very strong. It's hardwired into them. And yeah, you know, moms would happily face down a grizzly for their child. And that's what she did. She went to attack the grizzly, except the grizzly had a .300 blackout and put 5 rounds into her, including 2 into her head. The 2 into her head were overkill. Everyone understands that. And you don't shoot someone in the head to ensure that they are, that's what happened. When people are angry at someone else, they don't stop with a kill shot. They keep shooting. And I think that's what happened both to Paul and to Maggie here. Now, there's been a lot of talk about potentially there being 2 shooters, and there may have been. But I think Alex was one of them. He has the gunshot residue on him. His clothes are missing. You know, if there was a second shooter, that's a secret that he is probably going to take to his grave. Unless that person decides to, you know, make a clean breast of it, which I think would be highly doubtful. I think the closing argument went very, very well for the state, other than the length of time that it went. I would have been much more crisp. I would not have done as much walking around. I would have used my voice and the pitch of my voice, and I would have used a soft voice a lot more often than I used my hard and angry voice. And I would do that because there are only a few times when the state gets to be angry, and that's at the end. But at any rate, I hope that you have found this breakdown helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below. If you have enjoyed this and you haven't already subscribed, I would love for you to go over here and click on that notification bell and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. When you have an opportunity today to go out of your way to do something nice for somebody, you should do it. Life is short, and the benefits that you get from treating other people kindly are that you get treated kindly in return. Thank you so much again for watching. Have a great day. I will catch you on here next time.
If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.